So now we're on Daf Chav Zayin Omid Beis, and we're studying the unique shita of Rabbi Eliezer with regard to a sukkah called Shiva, meaning one sukkah for all 7 days. Ein yotzei misukkah l'sukkah. You're not allowed to eat in one sukkah and then continue eating in another sukkah, or sleep in one sukkah, and then continue and sleep in a second sukkah. So in other words, even, let's say, for example, he would use one sukkah for both eating and sleeping, and now he wants to relocate himself, he cannot do so. Not only that, in osim sukkah b'cholol shel moed, if he didn't make a sukkah on Erev Yontiv, he cannot make a sukkah in the middle of Yontiv. This is so foreign to us. Right? The Chachamim omrim, yotzei misukkah l'sukkah, yosim sukkah b'cholol shel moed. The Chachamim never required one sukkah for all 7 days. The Shavin, but they agree, she'im nafla, if his sukkah fell, it collapsed during the course of Yontiv, even Rabbi Eliezer would concede, shechozer ubona b'cholol shel moed. He's allowed to re-establish the sukkah on cholol shel moed, meaning he's not creating a new sukkah, he's just restructuring the old sukkah. And the Mefarshim say you would have to use the same materials, the same schach. My time with Rabbi Eliezer, very strange. Where does this come from? That you need one sukkah for all 7 days. Omar Kra, this is the way Rabbi Eliezer understood the pasuk. Chag HaSukkos tasel lecha shivas yomim, 7 days. Now, again, the Torah is describing the Chag as Chag HaSukkos, but Rabbi Eliezer understands that phrase Chag HaSukkos is defining and categorizing the nature of the sukkah itself. Asay sukkah re'uya l'shiva. He's got to have a sukkah for all 7 days. In other words, Chag HaSukkos tasel lecha shivas yomim is defining the requirement of the sukkah, the chefetz of the sukkah. It's not enough that you sit in the sukkah for 7 days, but the sukkah itself has to be a 7-day sukkah. And if it's less than 7 days, bust. It's not a sukkah. Rabbanan, how did they interpret this pasuk? Hachi kamar achman. Say sukkah b'chag. The Torah is telling you that during the chag, which is 7 days, make a sukkah. If you didn't make the sukkah the first day, make it on the second day. If you didn't on the second day, on the third day. Which means that, let's say, for example, according to the Chachamim, he would only be chayiv in sukkah for 1 day. Right? We had many cases where you part from sukkah. He's a choleh, he's on the road, he's doing business, he's shomer pardesim, he's a security guard, and so on. It turns out that there's only 1 day off. They gave 1 day off during sukkah. So he'll build a sukkah for that 1 day. That's the Chachamim. The Shavin, they agree, shem nafla, if his sukkah fell apart, so the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that simple? Mal the Tamar, I would have said, according to Rabbi Eliezer, Hi Achrisihi. Now that his sukkah collapsed, it's gone. Forget it. Iskadol v'Iskadesh, halachically it's buried. And now you're building a brand new sukkah. V'yein l'shiva, you only have 5 days left in sukkahs. A mashmalan, no, that when he rebuilds his sukkah, it's not that the old sukkah was completely removed and it's buried in history, but that on the contrary, he is now recreating the old sukkah. So it's really a sukkah of kol shiva. And Tosfos says that he might have to use all the original materials of his first sukkah in order to reconstruct the sukkah according to Rabbi Eliezer. Other Rishonim say maybe the schach is enough. Some say that even if he brings, because again, why did the sukkah fall apart? Apparently there was something weak in its construction. Or maybe one of the defanos broke, so he has to replace it. That's good enough. More radical way of understanding this Gemara of Nafla is that as long as he had an intention to build the sukkah for 7 days, for the entire period of Chag, that's sufficient. If circumstances beyond his control made it impossible for the sukkah that he built to last for 7 days, then let him build another sukkah, which theoretically would have lasted for 7 days.
Because theoretically, I mean, that fulfills the pasuk.
According to Rabbi Eliezer, it could be that once he set up Sukkah A, and that Sukkah was meant to last 7 days, then there was a what do you call it, a typhoon? What's it called? A hurricane, a tsunami, and it blew down his Sukkah. So according to this interpretation, again, all the other Mefarshim say he's got to reconstruct that Sukkah that fell. But one radical approach to Rabbi Eliezer is that since he had an intention on the original sukkah that it should be for 7 days, circumstances beyond his control, like you said, it's tsunami. So now when he rebuilds the sukkah, he is conceptually, in terms of his intention, replacing the original sukkah. And he only has 3 days left or 5 days left of sukkahs. That second sukkah is a replacement of the first sukkah. Why? Because he really had an intention in both of these sukkahs that they should be a 7-day sukkah, but that was impossible.
That's maybe that's a chiddush.
The chiddush in Rabbi Eliezer is that even though Rabbi Eliezer, require a sukkah for all 7 days, if it collapsed, I can reconstruct it and I can be yotze with the second sukkah. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer, Omer, Kishem Shein Adam Yotze Yidecha Vasa B'Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, Bilulavo Shel Chavero. And why? If I borrow your lulav on the first day, that's not sufficient. I cannot fulfill my mitzvah. The Torah said, "Lukachtem." What's the next word? Lachem. We have to underline the word lachem. By Yom Rishon, Priyetzadar, Prikabel Smarm, etc., etc. And what does the word lachem mean? Mishel lachem. It's got to be your lulav. This, by the way, is going to be we'll see in the next parak, the third parak, is going to be the problem of giving your lulav to a child. Let's say you have a child, a son. You want to be mechanic, but if it's the first day of Sukkot, you've got to be very careful. First, you take the lulav and then give it to your child. Because if you give it to your child before you are yotze with that lulav, it could be you can't be fulfilling your mitzvah because the child has the ability to make a kinyan, but he can't be makna. He can't give it back to you. Again, that's a sugya in the third parak. Kach ein adam yotze chovaso b'sukaso shel chavera. If you invite me to your, we think of Sukkot as like a friendly kind of holiday. It's when we all get together and so forth and so on. That's because we don't know about Rabbi Eliezer. We don't pass like that. But Rabbi Eliezer says that you can't be able to your mitzvah of Sukkah in your friend's Sukkah. You have to own the Sukkah. The Chsiv, Chaga Sukkos Taseh. What's the next word? Lecha. Shivas. And what does Lecha teach you? Mishelcha. It has to be yours. So again, according to Rabbi Eliezer, number one, you can't hop from sukkah to sukkah, even if you own both sukkahs. It's got to be one sukkah for all 7 days. Number two, you can't hop from one sukkah to another sukkah if the other sukkah is owned by your friend, even though your friend built it for all 7 days. But l'cha means it's got to be your sukkah. V'chachamim omrim, af al pi sha'omru einon yotzi decha v'as v'yotim rishon v'lulav v'shal chavero, aval yotzi decha v'asa v'sukaso shal chavero. When it says lachem, that's with regard to the Daled Minim, it's got to be yours on the first day of Sukkot. But with regard to Sukkah, we're going to reinterpret the word lecha according to the Chacham. Why? What compels them to change what seems to be, Rabbi Eliezer is right, the intuitive interpretation of the word lecha? It's because we have another pasuk. We got to juggle it with another pasuk. The pasuk says, "Kol ezrach Israel yetru b'sukkos." Any citizen of Israel should sit in sukkah. What is this pasuk coming to tell me? Kol ezrach b'Yisrael, v'lamed shekol Yisrael re'uyim leishek b'sukkah achas. We can have one gigantic sukkah, and all of Klal Yisrael, the entire community, could sit in that one sukkah. And it's impossible to assume that every single member is the owner of that sukkah. You can't imagine a sukkah that's owned by everyone, and yet everyone can sit in one sukkah. So by definition, the Torah is teaching me that you don't have to own the sukkah. So the Rabbanan Hai Lecha my Darshibe, but why did the Torah add the word Lecha, which was the basis of Rabbi Eliezer's conclusion that you require ownership over the sukkah? And the answers me the Torah is only telling you that a sukkah gzula is disqualified. If it's a stolen sukkah, then you cannot be yotze. Now, again, there are many different variations or permutations of a sukkah gzula. Let's take the simplest case of a sukkah gzula in a case where the man, let's go Ruvain, the thief, he stole Shimon's beams or wood or schach, and he used the beams that are owned by Shimon to build his sukkah. So that's possible because it's gzula. So again, the word lecha then is not a positive requirement, but rather it is indicating a psul. You follow the difference? Rabbi Eliezer is saying the word lecha is a positive condition. It's got to be lecha. The Rabbanan says it can't be the opposite of lecha. It doesn't have to be lecha. Aval she'ula, but with regard to shula, if I borrow your sukkah, then even though it's not my sukkah, it was not excluded under the word lecha, because lecha is coming to exclude gzula, a stolen sukkah. Now, why would I assume that even if it's not mine, in the case where you invited me into your sukkah, I can fulfill the mitzvah? That's because b'shu'ula ksiv kol ezrach b'Yisrael. So this is the way the Rabbanan engineer what seems to be mutually exclusive verses. One verse, lecha, seems to indicate you have to own it. The other verse, called ezrach b'Yisrael, seems that we could all fit into one sukkah, and I don't have to own the sukkah. How do I reconcile these two psukim? The answer is that lecha is coming to exclude gzula, and ezrach b'Yisrael is coming to include she'ula. So the Gemara now raises the question about Eliezer. He says that she'ula is disqualified. I cannot fulfill my mitzvah in your sukkah. I need my sukkah. Hi, kol ezrach my avdilin. What is he going to do with the pasuk kol ezrach, which seems to indicate that every single Jew could be yotze in one big, gigantic, colossal sukkah? And the Gemara answers, "Mi boile leger shenis gayer bein tayim." Now this is really fascinating. We said that according to Rabbi Eliezer, you have to have a sukkah for how many days? All 7 days. A man was misgayer in the middle of sukkahs. A katan became a gadol in the middle of sukkahs. On Chalavite sukkahs, we made a big bar mitzvah party. What do we do now? This katan, or the ger, could not possibly have a sukkah of kol shivas yomim, because if they would have built a sukkah before the gers, before the gadlus, that's not a sukkah. That's what the pasuk called ezrach b'Yisrael is coming to mechadish. That it means that kol shiva means your kol shiva. Now your kol shiva is not my kol shiva, right? Your kol shiva is 7 days, but my kol shiva is only 5 days because I became bar mitzvah on the 3rd day of Sukkot. But that's considered my full festival of Sukkot. So it means that the sukkah, according to Rabbi Eliezer, should extend over the entire period of Chovas Sukkah. So for you and I, Chovas Sukkah is 7 days. For the ger, it's only 5 days. For the cotton, it's only 5 days. But the sukkah extends over the entire period of what? Of Chova. Rabbanan. How did the Rabbanan know that if a person became a gadol or a ger in the middle of sukkahs, that he can fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah? And the Gemara gives the obvious answer. You don't have to make your sukkah 7 days. Lo itzrich, I don't need a pasuk to teach me that if you became obligated in the middle of sukkah because you became a ger or a gadol, that you are obligated and you can fulfill your mitzvah of sukkah. That's obvious. You know worse than a person who was not obligated the first 5 days. He was a shomer or whatever. And now on the 6th day, he builds his sukkah, which is the Chachamim sheet. We learned in a brisa. Now this next Gemara is good news for a married person, but maybe it's bad news for a married person. I don't know. You'll tell me. Ma'aseh Rabbi Eloi, Shaholach lahakbil pnei Rabbi Eliezer Rabbo belud berega. So Rabbi Eloi came to visit his Rebbe, Rabbi Eliezer, in the city of Lod, the Lubavitcher city. Anyway, beregel during the course of Yom Tov. Omar Lo, he got a shtach. You know what a shtach is, Rabbi Osai?
Punch.
Like a punch. You know, he got it over the head. A very harsh response. What are you doing here? Omar Lo, Eloi, ein chabishos ve'yaregel. You have not. I can't categorize you in the group of those who observe a regel. Why? What's the schlecht? What's so terrible? He came to visit his Rebbe during the regel. This is his Rebbe's response. You know, if it was me, I would have walked at it and said, "I can find another Rebbe." Rabbi Eliezer Omer. In this case of Sukkot, I like the lazy people who want to stay put. They want to stay at home. Why? The Chsiv v'samachta ata u'beisecha. The Torah tells us in Parshas Re'eh, I think we'll read it this Shabbos, if I'm not mistaken, in Dvarim Perek Yud Daled, that a person to rejoice with his household. What does this household mean? What is Beisecha? And the Gemara says, Beisecha zu ishtecha. It's your wife. And you're leaving your wife to go to Oma, to go to Lud? That's not the way you leave your wife behind. Now I'm thinking to myself that maybe Eloi would come back the same day. I don't know how far he lived from Lud. It doesn't say what city he lived in. But let's assume it took him a long time to get to Lud. It's going to take him a long time to get back home. And his wife is alone without him. So in a sense, this is good news for a married couple because it means you have a responsibility to be with your wife on Yom. It's bad news if you want to go visit your Rebbe. So the Gemara says, Eini, is this really so? He's going to derive from a pasuk, interesting, a pasuk in Malachim Beis, that a person is obligated to visit his Rebbe during the Rega. Shenemar is so fascinating to me. We learned this from the Shunamis, the Eshes Shunamis. She packed her bags and she went to visit Elisha. And her husband looked at her with weird eyes. Madua at holeches elov hayom. Why today are you going to Elisha? Lo Chodesh, lo Shabbos. It's not Rosh Chodesh and it's not Shabbos. Michlal. We see from the response of the husband of the Shunamis that the Chodesh v'Shabbos mechayev inish lakule ape rabit. And it been Shabbos or Yom Tov. And Kolshkein in the case of Yom Tov, and it been Shabbos or Rosh Chodesh, I meant to say, and how much more so in the case of Yom Tov, she would have had to gone to visit her Rebbe. And that's why he was so surprised. Today is not Shabbos, today is not Rosh Chodesh. Why are you packing your bags and going to visit Elisha the Navi? So now we're in trouble because Rabbi Eliezer says you're not allowed to leave your house on Yom Tov. And Rabbi Yitzchak says you have to be Makabel Pnei Rabbo Yom Tov. Lo kasha, hadi azal v'yasi v'yomei. When did Rabbi Yitzchak require of us to be Makabel Pnei Rabbo Beregel? That's only if you live within close proximity. This is a recipe that a person should live close to his Rebbe so that he can go, that's called Azil, V'asi in return, B'yomei on the same day. So he hasn't left his wife overnight. He can still rejoice with his wife when he comes back at night. But Rabbi Eliezer, when he got upset with Eloi, the Azil v'lo Asi b'yom, because Eloi was going to remain, apparently, in Lud for at least overnight, maybe for the course of the entire Yom Tov, I don't know. But it's certainly overnight. And that's not accepted. I just want to mention a Chiddush of the Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam. I did a lot of research on Hilchos Talmud Torah in my youth. Rambam Hilchos Talmud Torah. I have about 500 pages of typed out Chiddushim on. My wife keeps saying, "When are you going to publish?" Right. Anyway, so the Kesef Mishnah, Parakeh Hilchos Talmud Torah, on the mitzvah being Makabel Pnei Rabbo Beregel, he notices that the Rambam did not add that stipulation that he can get back to his wife on the same day. So the Kesef Mishnah is Machadesh that there's actually a machlokas here between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak, when he said Chayav Adam Lahakbil Pnei Rabbo Beregel, he didn't stipulate. He didn't add any conditions. He didn't say, well, make sure you'll get back home the same day. That was Rabbi Eliezer's understanding based on his reading of the Samachta Atov Beisecha. Whereas Rabbi Yitzchak thinks that the Samachta Atov Beisecha only applies when at some point during the course of Yontif he'll get back. But he doesn't require that he has to get back on the same day. You get the impression that Rabbi Eliezer was a traveler. He probably wanted to teach Torah in many different places. In this case, he went up to the upper Galil. Interesting that even today you have the Galil Ha'Elyon Hilgil Tachton. Succah Shel Yochanan Rabbi Loi B'Kisra. And he went up to the higher part of the Galil in a place called Caesarea or Kisrei, Amile Caesarian, or the two versions. That's exactly where this location is. And Vigia Chamal Sukkah. As they were sitting in the sukkah, the sun rays started beating down in the sukkah. And it was Shabbos. Amalo, so Rabbi Yochanan turns to Rabbi Eliezer, Ma'u she'efros oleh sadil. Am I permitted to cover the sukkah with a sheath in order to prevent the sunlight from coming in? And this comes under what's called Meleches Boneh, which is one of the 39 melachos on Shabbos. And the question is, if you add something on a temporary basis to a pre-established structure that's called Mosif ala Oel Aroi, so you have an Oel Aroi, which is a temporary structure, and now you want to add a covering, is that mutter? Omar Lo, so Rabbi Eliezer gave him an answer. He says, Ein lecha kol shevet v'shevet misoshelo hemid mimenu shofet. Every single shevet had a shofet during the period of shofet. Rashi goes through the entire list. Higia chamal achatzi sukkah. Now already it's almost midday, and the sun is beating down in the middle of the sukkah. Omalo. So Rabbi Yochanan turns to Rabbi Eliezer. Ma'usha efros oleh sadin. Can I cover it and block the sunlight with a sheet? Is this a problem? Mosif al ol aroi. Omalo. Rabbi Eliezer responds, every single shevet had a novi. Shevet Yehuda Binyamin and Nidu Malachim al pi nevim. And in the case of Yehuda and Binyamin, their malachim, their kings, were appointed as a result of the prophecy of the prophet. Do you follow what's going on here, Rabbi? Rabbi Eliezer is just avoiding the question. Now, at this point already, it's really beating down. The sun is reaching even down to the feet. So Yochanan takes the law into his own hands. Natal Yochanan Sadin Peras Olem. So what does Rabbi Eliezer do at this point? Hifshil Rabbi Eliezer Taliso Achorov. He draped himself with his cloak. V'yatz, and he walks out of the sukkah. Meaning, don't quote me as if I gave license to cover a sukkah on Shabbos with a sheet. It wasn't that he didn't want to teach Torah to Rabbi Yochanan, but rather, he never would say anything that he didn't hear from his Rebbe, and he never heard an answer to this question from his Rebbe. The Gemara asks, I don't understand. Rabbi Yochanan packed out of his house during Sukkah, spending Shabbos in the Sukkah with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, you have to have one Sukkah for all 7 days. The Gemara answers, Regel Acher Hav. It was a different Yom. It wasn't on Sukkah. It was on either Pesach or Shavuos. It says they sat in the sukkah. They were sitting in the sukkah because it was comfortable in the sukkah until the sun started beating down. Gemara says, how could it be that he left his house on Pesach or Shavuos, leaving his wife behind to be Makabel Pnei Rabo? Shabbos Havu. The Gemara says it was not Yom Tov at all. It was Shabbos. So the Gemara says, "V'tifshol le'mi dite." We know that Rabbi Eliezer himself is committed to the position that you're not allowed to add to an oil, even if the oil is haroy on Shabbos. This non kakach alone. So we have, how would you say this in English? Filone, curtains. He says that if you have curtains over a window, Rabbi Eliezer Omer bisman shekotcher v'toli, only if the curtains are tied down to the building, to the structure, and therefore they're part of the building, v'toli, and they're suspended in air, then pokakimbo, you can take these below note and you can shutter up the window, close the window if you're lav. But if not, then ain't pokakimbo. You're not allowed to close up the window. Why? Because you're being mosiv to an oil aroy. Chachamim beikach pokakim. Chachamim allow it. We'll take a look just at the first line here on Daf Chav Chesam Aleph. Hasam hu demevatel, aval hacha delo mevatel lo. The reason why Rabbi Eliezer would prohibit hokakin, meaning to shutter up the window, is because he wants the shutter to be part of the structure. That's called bittul. So he's really creating an oil, and that's prohibited. But here, in the case of putting a sheet on, just for the few minutes that the sun is beating down, that's only a temporary kind of thing, and it doesn't become part of the sukkah itself, and therefore he's not chayev for meleches bonim. Now the Gemara here until the Mishnah is an agadita, which is good news because it's an easy agadita. That's rare, an easy agadita, and then that'll give us a little bit more time. It'll be a little less pressure to start the Mishnah after we do the agadita Mishnah tomorrow. So I wish you all a great day. Thank you so much.